Following the 2016 presidential election, a clear divide has risen and grown between the American people. Many question how someone with absolutely no political experience walked right into the most prestigious position in all of the United States of America. Questions and fears have only continued to rise as underqualified and people with clear conflicts of interest are essentially handed positions at the heads of federal agencies, much to the dismay of people currently affiliated with the agency. This makes you wonder why there is a complete lack of regulation dictating who can hold some of the highest and most influential positions in government, and what potential threats does this pose? As you can see in this chart, Donald Trump is the first president in history with absolutely no experience in either politics or government. Some may wonder why this is even worth discussing. John Brennan, a former employee of the CIA for 30 years, who also served closely under both George W. Bush and Barack Obama as a high-ranking intelligence official, puts it best when he voiced his fears in an interview with Uri Friedman, a writer for The Atlantic. When asked about his reservations about Donald Trump, he responded, "It's a combination of concerns and factors. There are his traits, his personal qualities that are a concern. There is a lack of deliberate thinking, that's a concern. There is a lack of understanding and knowledge, that's a concern. And then there is the bullying tendency that compounds all of the other deficiencies." Brennan touches upon Donald Trump's woeful inexperience in international affairs and the pressing concern that this could lead us into another war. When discussing Trump's approach in office, he noted that it is to tear down what came before him and criticize those who came before him, without understanding the reason why certain policies were formulated and implemented. It is dangerous to have an inexperienced and underqualified leader. The fact of the matter is, many people, whether citizens or people high up in government, are nervous as to what is going to happen next. Regulations and policies need to be established governing the specific qualifications of candidates for positions of power in the federal government. We are already witnessing Donald Trump working out of his own self-interest, for example, appointing Scott Pruitt to the head of the EPA in an attempt to derail and carry out his goal of eliminating the EPA. Environmental degradation holds the potential to be irreversible. Therefore, many feel that Scott Pruitt being head of the Environmental Protection Agency poses the biggest threat to the planet and public health as we know it. Time and time again, Pruitt has openly put the economic interests of big corporations so much higher than the quality of public health, as well as the viability of our planet, hurting the very elements that the EPA was created to protect. Not only is Pruitt backed by big-time polluters, he has sued the EPA in upwards of 13 times on their behalf and threatened to undermine protections in place for air and water. In an interview between Newsweek and Nate James, an information technology specialist for the EPA, he explained the current state of inside the EPA as, "The mood here is morbid. There is an element of fear." When Pruitt, a self-confirmed climate change skeptic, was asked about his views on mankind's impact of climate change, his answer further proved his incompetence as head of the EPA.
By statutes,
I'm asking your personal opinion.
my personal opinion is immaterial.
Really?
To the job of
You are going to be
carrying
the head of the agency to protect the environment, and your personal feelings about whether climate change is caused by human activity and carbon emissions is immaterial?
Senator, I've acknowledged to you that the human activity impacts the climate.
Impacts.
Yes.
Scientific community doesn't tell us it impacts. They say it is the cause of climate change. We have to transform our energy system. Do you believe we have to?
Pruitt is openly working to strip the agency. He refuses to take advice from some of the most elite scientists of the EPA and even abolished advisory committees. He has even gone so far as to prevent EPA scientists from speaking publicly about climate change, such as at the Narragansett Bay Conference, where he claimed there had not been enough debate on the issue. On his personal order, information on climate change was taken off of the EPA's website in an attempt to keep the public undereducated about what we are doing to our planet. On top of rolling back on many of the regulations put in place to protect human health previously, Pruitt made the push to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement, making the U.S. the lone holdout in a plan to globally reduce greenhouse gas emissions. An alarming number of scientists have left since Pruitt took over. Combine this with recent regulatory rollback, and the EPA could be stripped of all it has accomplished since forming in 1970. Regulations need to be put in place that do not allow a person with such clear conflicts of interest to be able to hold a position in which they possess the power to destroy the agency that regulates who they work closely with. Pruitt is using the power of his position to keep the American people in the dark and continue to place the needs of big-time polluters over the needs of the environment, which is the very agency he is supposed to be protecting. The United States system of checks and balances utilizes an intricate and mostly successful framework to ensure that political power does not fall solely into the hands of a few individuals or groups. However, the system is flawed when it comes to designating appointees to the heads of government positions. There is a striking lack of regulation on the criteria one must meet in order to be considered for these positions, which in turn is weakening the infrastructure the United States government is based upon. Many policies that have been put in place in order to keep this system fair have slowly been rolled back in the favor of whichever party dominates Congress, which is composed of the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress plays a critical role in establishing the government's annual budget, declaring war, and regulating the power held by the president in the passing of laws. Another important role Congress plays is making decisions when creating or rolling back on regulations. When it comes to the presidency, there are only 3 criteria a person must meet in order to be eligible. These 3 conditions pertain to age, residence, and citizenship. Anyone who meets this criteria, whether they have a background in politics or not, is eligible to run for the highest-ranking position in the United States government. Officially, it is written in the Constitution as, "No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have obtained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States." Requiring a minimum age that a presidential candidate must meet was initially added in order to ensure that a candidate will be experienced and mature, making decisions for the good of the country as a whole, not for personal gain. As I mentioned previously, having an ill-experienced leader, for example Donald Trump, poses a serious threat not only to the American people, but also to the goals of agencies established to treat and protect all Americans fairly. An overwhelming amount of civilians, educators, scientists, members of government, and many more have voiced serious and very real concerns over many of the Trump administration's hastily made executive decisions, of which are a consequence of an undereducated, inexperienced leader. The citizenship requirement was presumably added with the intention of separating foreign influence from the highest and most influential position in the United States government. Regulatory rollbacks, such as rolling back on regulations that prevent foreign contributions to political campaigns, have weakened the barriers between the two, creating a dangerous window for foreign nations to influence members high up in the federal government. As I mentioned previously, the Trump administration has gradually gained a reputation of appointing underqualified candidates, many with clear conflicts of interest, to the heads of federal agencies. For example, Scott Pruitt, head of the EPA, Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, and Andy Putzer, Department of Labor. The requirements for eligibility in holding these positions are vague and therefore easily manipulated. This makes opportunity for these underqualified candidates to hold positions of utmost importance in the federal government, consequently leading to the derailment of federal agencies put in place to protect different aspects of American society. Quite plainly, the core requirement to hold one of these positions is, as the Chicago Tribune states, to deserve confirmation, nominees must, at a minimum, demonstrate a clear commitment to the fundamental mission of the departments they seek to lead. This standard is clearly not being met by the majority of the Trump administration's appointees, and we are already beginning to witness the repercussions of this. Multiple people, such as Scott Pruitt and Betsy DeVos, have blatantly stated that they do not see the need for the agencies they have been appointed to, making evident their lack of commitment to the mission of the agencies they are responsible for leading. The process of being approved starts with a nomination made by the president. A candidate must then be reviewed by a committee in order to be passed on to the Senate, although a disapproval may be overridden by the Senate. Once passed on, nominees must have a confirmation hearing, with the purpose of gathering information on each candidate. Following this, a simple majority vote by the Senate determines if the candidate is approved or disapproved. The core issue with this system is that the American people have no say in who is or is not nominated. Current regulation over who can hold high-ranking roles in the federal government needs reform in order to ensure only qualified, educated candidates be considered, therefore maintaining the structure of agencies working to protect the American quality of life. Moving forward, candidates should be required to meet a higher caliber of qualifications, far beyond only age and citizenship. There needs to be a more intricate system of electing people to the heads of federal agencies, in which the public holds the majority of the vote. Too much power is given to the small group of people that determine who can hold these positions, and the time for reform is now. Candidates should be required to have years of experience working either in the agency they seek to run or in an organization with similar goals and values. A candidate should not be eligible to hold positions of this rank if they have ties with organizations whose values contradict with the mission of the agency that they are being considered for. Any suspicion of foul play or acts of receiving money from contradictory organizations should call for reevaluation by Congress, in which said person is suspended while under investigation. The opinions of current members of each agency should be valued and taken into account throughout the approval process. Electing these officials must be done so on a much larger scale, in which the public's opinions are heard, questions are answered, and vote is considered.